Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate the life of a friend, a family member, and a partner. We've all known media literacy since we were kids. Some of our fondest memories are reading The Great Gatsby together or scrolling through Google to find credible references. Sure, we used Spark Notes without them a time or two, but we reconciled our differences. Thing is, media literacy has been there with us throughout our whole lives. I need to say something. Media literacy clearly isn't dead. In fact, every year someone says that media literacy died, but I saw them at the coffee shop the other day reading Catcher in the Rye. See? They're faking it. I just saw them move. What are you talking about? They're clearly not alive. And even if they were, they would have explicitly told us that. What would they even have to gain by faking their own death? Life insurance money. Their name and the cultural zeitgeist. Not being around us anymore because we're always checking our phones when we watch movies together. No. Come on, guys. We all know that media literacy isn't that nuanced or foresighted. We don't have to think too hard about this. Whoa. Who died in here? You know, if media literacy wasn't dead, maybe you'd be able to read the room. What the fuck, man? Aw, hey, come on now, guys. We don't need to be that mean. About 2 months ago, a new discourse dropped on TikTok and Twitter. What started as a heated discussion on the 2023 film by Yorgos Lanthimos called Poor Things steamrolled into the now overused academic buzzword we have today: media literacy. More specifically, how media literacy is dead. Some people genuinely had thoughtful insights about what the term actually means and how to help people critically engage with a story. Others devolved the conversations into a clever gotcha for calling someone stupid. You don't like something I like? You must be media illiterate. As with any buzzword discovered on social media, media literacy has been losing all meaning. This discourse is nothing new, though. Media literacy has been a term in the headlines for decades now. We've just arrived at a new iteration of it. During the 2016 elections, there was a panic around news outlets and how discerning fake news from real news was more important than ever. That teaching kids how to find sources online or comparing the bias in an article will help us better understand the media that we consume, i.e., media literacy. Going even further, teaching media literacy had its beginnings in the late 1920s and early 1930s. This would be around the same time that talkies were becoming more prevalent. No longer were the images just moving, they were speaking to you. Is this the work of the devil? No? Just Warner Brothers? Same thing. There was a desire to protect kids from all these media outlets that were popping up. You now had newspapers, film, that kid on the corner going, "Extra, extra, read all about it," tiddlywinks, radio, and worst of all, the dreaded book. Media literacy in its origins was still, at the core, about analyzing media. However, it was less about helping you engage with the media you consume thoughtfully, and more about helping you not engage with media at all. If you are literate about what media is, then you know how to avoid it. This protectionism may be the reason why a bunch of people were listening to War of the Worlds on the radio and thought it was real. What zero media literacy does to a motherfucker. That is to say, media literacy isn't this new thing that died because of the internet. With mass communication media emerging every year, media literacy has been increasingly harder to understand, let alone teach. The discussion should really be less about the death of media literacy and more about how media literacy is going through constant and unending puberty. Media literacy is on Accutane right now with the flakiest skin imaginable. I resent that. What is media literacy, though? With the term being thrown around willy-nilly, the actual meaning has really been watered down. Like I already said, it isn't a clever way to insult someone or say that you fundamentally disagree with how someone else has interpreted a story. Media literacy is engaging with a piece of content. It's the act of doubting what you see, then gathering your own information to think critically about the piece of media you consumed. This could be in the form of researching the information in a news article, reading the sources for an essay, or how many people know it, asking why the light is green in The Great Gatsby. Critical analysis can come in all kinds of forms. Two people could critically analyze a book and walk away with two very differing opinions. Not all media works for everyone, whether they understand the intent of it or not. It doesn't make a person media illiterate to disagree with you, though. It does, however, make them media illiterate if they refuse to critically engage in a piece of media that they're discussing. This is where the biggest issue lies with the modern iteration of media literacy discourse. The internet is vast. It gives anyone a voice and lets anyone hear it. Which is why discerning bad faith criticism from ones that are made in actual good faith has been that much harder. You can never know whether someone engaged critically with a piece of media by just a 240 character tweet or a 30-second TikTok video, leading the current discourse online about media literacy skills to come to a standstill. There are largely three reasons that I've found as to why the current discussion is growingly heated. The first being, it's not that deep bro culture, or some may even call it corn plating if they're even more chronically online. Essentially, these are people who oppose the critique or analysis of a piece of media that would give us larger context into what the author, artist, etc. is trying to say. The second reason is the instant gratification that the digital age has conditioned us to seek when we consume media. Third is the strive for moral purity that has been steadily rising, and the push away from portraying negative actions or harm in a story. The culture of "it's not that deep, bro" is one that I've been on the receiving end of before myself. It's a pervasive sentiment on social media that tries to stop people from digging past the surface level of a work.
It is really not that deep, bro. It's just not that deep. Whatever it is you're tweaking about, worrying about, stressing about, anxious about, it's not that deep.
In most cases, this comes from a place of feeling that critical analysis can or will destroy your experience with a story. Enjoyment is the experience that you want to get out of a creative piece of work. We see reason as what would ruin that enjoyment. We teach mathematics and chemistry, but plays written for sweating groundlings? Surely they were not written to be studied, but to be enjoyed. We do not study a chocolate nut sundae. This can be a deeply dangerous ideology. When we analyze media, we can further understand our own beliefs. It also makes us question ourselves and empathize with others. The fear of analysis is the fear of questioning our own point of view. If we dig past the surface level of a story, what if we realize it's not perfect anymore? It has shortcomings like anything else. Worse yet, what if we start to think it's bad? We can't have bad taste. Our whole persona online is about being someone with the most immaculate taste. Believing stories aren't that deep is the refusal of critical engagement. In analyzing the inner workings of a character, the underlining themes or messages, it is seen as the antithesis of what media is ultimately for. Many people just want to kick their feet up and turn their brain off after their already excruciatingly long 9-to-5s. If the curtains are blue, the curtains are blue. To study is to make the media consumption feel like the office job you just commuted an hour from.
The curtains were blue. What does that mean? What does the author want to say with those words?
It means that she had blue curtains because she bought the house and there were blue curtains there.
They want escapism. What takes this refusal for media literacy even further is the instant gratification we've become used to with the digital age. I promise, I'm not just an old man yells at clouds though. I love the internet. Why else would I spend hours on it a day, or even be making this video and saying hi in the pinned comment? But even if I love the internet, we have to admit it has drastically shifted how we consume media and how much of it we consume in a day. Streaming services like Netflix have popularized the binge format, which drops an entire season of a show in one day. No longer do you have to sit and wait at a predetermined time to watch the show that you love. You can watch the entire thing in one sitting as soon as it comes out. We rarely have a week's worth of time anymore to ruminate about the latest TV sensation, sharing thoughts on the events that unfolded in the recent episode, or discussing why a character acted in a certain way. The constant rollouts don't let us sit and analyze media. We have the next show to binge. Binge model formats have made us accustomed to not only the instant gratification and the speed of the rollouts, but in the speed of the story development too. Exposition or development needs to be given right away, otherwise the viewer might click off of the TV show. They need to grab your attention to keep you there. The same could be said for how videos or news headlines work as well. It's also why we have long-ass isekai titles with the entire plot in them, because people need to know if something is worth their time right away. These two reasons I've just mentioned blend into the third, and probably biggest reason as to why we're seeing so much discussion about media literacy: the demand for moral purity in media, a tale as old as time. From the book bans of today to the video game panic of yesteryear.
Instead of enriching a child's mind, these games teach a child to enjoy inflicting torture.
This demand has often come from parents or adults who are faking concern about children being traumatized by the media that they're consuming, but often it's a misnomer for moral panic. However, as of late, we are seeing younger audiences parroting the same rhetoric. With the desire to not critically analyze text and the need for instant satisfaction, you get a starkly contrasted point of view. The media you consume is either morally good or it's morally bad. What determines the side a piece of media lands on is its depiction of good or bad actions. Never mind whether the series is actually showing you that the actions are wrong. If it can't be distinguished by face value, then it's causing harm all the same. If you were around on Tumblr in 2014, this may sound vaguely similar to the blog Your Fave is Problematic, a site where an anonymous blogger compiled all the bad things a celebrity or an influencer had done. It didn't really matter whether these actions were of equal weight though. They were bad all the same in the eyes of the blogger. While it is good to acknowledge shortcomings or wrongdoings, especially in the terms of holding people accountable for truly abhorrent actions, in the form that this blog took, you only end up with a black and white mentality. Instead of critically engaging with the faults on a spectrum, all of them can be used as an instant gotcha. Your fave has XYZ? Then you and the author must endorse those things. Moral purity is often attached to the ideals of evangelical Christianity too. So what faces the most scrutiny in the face of moral purity is works by people who challenge it by simply existing. This is why books about queer relationships, the history of slavery, or commentary on the patriarchy are often the first to go in book bans. As I'll be honing specifically in on shoujo and josei manga for the rest of this video, that means that I'm going to be specifically talking about the misogyny around moral purity and media literacy. I want to make it clear though that women are not the only ones who suffer from this rhetoric, and especially ones who are either cis, straight, and or white. That being said, the Venn diagram for moral purity and misogyny is basically a circle. If you went to a Christian school like myself, you're acutely aware of the ones who had lectures on dress code and provoking boys with your feminine wiles. Even if you were literally the only, at the time, girl in the entire school who wore pants, you still had to sit there and listen about the lecture on skirt length. I'm clearly still not over this. The onus of purity is on women, and the horrors of impurity is what is meant to drive them. This is why we see such a divide in elements of media that make us uncomfortable, even if they are intended to do so. Due to this, books by and for women are often the ones to face the most backlash and scrutiny for morality, especially when considering manga, where shoujo and josei get the brunt of it because of their feminine aesthetics, characters, and authors. Whether these manga are meant to be fluffy, heartwarming stories or deeply complex, they are judged swiftly and harshly based on what people believe is morally correct. Series made for young, impressionable girls must uphold the purity that they are striving to attain. It can't be left in a gray area, otherwise recognition about harmful ideas, actions, or concepts will lead to their impurity. This is why much of the early shoujo works made by men were focused on teaching girls how to behave. When taboo topics are covered in shoujo or josei manga, the critique is rarely from a standpoint of analysis. Rather, it usually comes from a place of moral posturing about what should be portrayed instead, even if the series is using it as a parody of a well-known trope or critiquing it by showing it. One example of this being the twins, Hikaru and Kaoru, from Ouran High School Host Club. Yeah, we need to talk about the two elephants in Music Room 3. In the manga, the twins are shown to be engaging in twincest fan service for the host club they work at. This usually only goes as far as being very up in each other's faces or making innuendo about their close brotherly bond. The two go the furthest when they're showing off for the girls they service at the host club, though. Rarely outside of the host club do they make innuendos about their relationship, and their closeness is shown to come from them isolating themselves from others. Hikaru and Kaoru neither seriously engage in the act of twincest, nor does this series actually endorse it. From what I've seen though, some people truly criticize Ouran for having incest in it. This is far from the case though if you look past the surface of what is shown. The two brothers are not in love with each other past their familial bonds, and as the course of the series goes on, they find independence from each other. While they are shown to be close in private moments as well, this closeness is in no way the same vein as their hosting act. Ouran plays on the tropes of fan fiction, otome games, and the like. It is a parody that the twins themselves are in on throughout the entire series. They never have actual feelings for each other, they never engage physically, and they grow past their codependence. If we just look on the surface and only judge from the instant gratification, then sure, they're engaging in twincest. This distance from critically thinking about a piece of fiction leads us to only have a surface level understanding of it though. At face value, it's not even a parody series. If we take this a step further into a series where twincest is actually depicted, this still doesn't mean that the series is actually endorsing this act. We must still critically analyze why it is being shown to us. I found this to be the case with the manga Ceres by Yu Watase. You'll see many people flat out call it an incest manga or say it's problematic for these reasons. In fact, when I recommended it in a video, that was literally the first comment I got about the series. Despite the fact that Yu Watase says in one of the side panels that they too find it weird if a reader shipped the brother and sister. For those unfamiliar, Ceres is a series about twins, Aya and Aki, who awake to the spirits of their past lives on their 16th birthday. Aya is possessed by the celestial being Ceres, who was forced into marriage by a man named Shiso, who is possessing Aki. Aki's possessor is a manipulative, possessive man who believes that Ceres is his property and has no regard for her own decisions. The series itself comments about how women's bodies are seen as possessions for men throughout the generations and how they are constantly violated. So when Aki succumbs to the spirit of Shiso, it is a deeply traumatizing event for both him and Aya. Aki doesn't want to touch his sister. and his sister doesn't want to be touched. The scenes that portray this are uncomfortable. They make you feel sorry for every victim involved. It's especially troubling for Aya, who must now live with the fact that her brother is both no longer there mentally and also violated her body. This arc of the manga is a further commentary of what is already the overarching themes of the series. In fact, once again, Uetase almost says as much in the side panels, stating that they were trying to put everything bad about men into the limelight and really trying to hit this point home. When critically analyzing these actions with other context from the story, the depiction does not equal endorsement. The depiction is there, and it's deeply uncomfortable, that much is true. But we shouldn't outright refuse engaging with these works on that ground, especially if we put this in the context of Uetase probably struggling with their own gender identity throughout making Ceres. Morally policing people that engage with works which include taboo topics falls on both the reader and the author. The young girls are at fault for enjoying and reading them. They're seen as being not smart enough from knowing right from wrong, even if they are critically engaging with the acts that are shown. On the other hand, the author that is depicting these topics are morally failing these pure-hearted girls. Colette!
Hello, darkness, my old
They're enticing them with discussions they shouldn't even know about, and therefore making them impure by having them consume this content. This dichotomy can particularly be seen in the romance genre, as it's both pigeonholed for being for girls and also largely consumed by them. Instead of viewing romance as being fiction like anything else, it's often viewed as a guidebook for relationships. Devaluing both romance as a storytelling medium and girls as being too media illiterate to critically engage with a story outside of its relation to purity. A romance manga that portrays a complex, messy relationship is put to the side as being romanticizing abuse. Young girls can't engage with this media because they'll be too impressionable and maybe even try to recreate it themselves. Characters are divided into red flags and green flags instead of engaging with the traits or flaws that are being shown. They're treated as actual viable options for people to date rather than a character through which the author is depicting a story. With the anime just about to wrap up, A Condition Called Love has become a hot topic for debate for this reason. It's a romance manga that I love dearly and have covered on this channel in depth years before the anime even got announced. From my own personal critical analysis of the series, it deconstructs the romance tropes that we have been shown in media for generations now and reconstructs them in a way that suits both of the characters. It also analyzes the hopeless romantic and how, if left unchecked, it becomes less about being in love and more about narcissism. In the series, the main character of Hananoi has very clear flaws. He constantly seeks reassurance, which leads to impulsive behaviors and is often cold to those around him. Rather than treating him like a villain though, our main protagonist Hotaru treats him with understanding and kindness, subsequently letting him grow throughout the story along with Hotaru. As even if he's flawed, he's not doing these things in the story out of malice, but out of self-hatred and the need to be loved. However, despite this, online discourse about this series has led to people calling it a romanticization of toxic relationships. The entire story is morally impure to them and will lead young, impressionable girls to want to date obsessive guys like Hananoi. They'll end up in toxic relationships if they consume this story. Even worse, the author is only portraying this relationship because they themselves are in a toxic relationship. They're using it as an outlet to cope, and you're the byproduct of this toxicity. Combining anti-analysis, instant gratification, moral purity, and misogyny into a jumbled cacophony of online discourse that it's hard to suss out where the actual criticism is. By nature of this manga being in the romance genre, people think that all of the actions shown are meant to be romantic or romanticized. This is a very surface level look at what the romance genre has to offer when exploring character dynamics. As I've tried to show so far, not all depictions of harmful actions or thoughts are actually an endorsement of them. For example, the very first chapter of A Condition Called Love doesn't show Hananoi's actions as being romantic. When Hananoi is spending hours out in the snow looking for Hotaru's hair clip, he's not praised for this, he's scolded. While Hananoi believes this to be a sweet gesture of his love, Hotaru doesn't. She even finds it selfish and one-sided. If he puts himself in harm's way for her, then how is she supposed to feel when ultimately he gets hurt? She explicitly states that if this is what love is, then she doesn't want to be a part of it. The reason Hotaru agrees to try dating Hananoi isn't for this grand gesture that he shows her overnight. It's for a much smaller reason that she feels is more in line with what her definition of love would be. The reason was because Hananoi noticed a small little detail about her that she herself didn't even notice. The initial depiction of Hananoi's overly eager behavior is seen as neither romantic nor even welcomed upon further analysis. Rather, it's in the quiet moments where he's being more genuine, where Hotaru welcomes his feelings. In terms of instant gratification, you often see people say that Hananoi takes too long to develop, or that he takes one step forward but 2 steps back. They want the instant gratification of Hananoi working all of his flaws out right at the beginning of the story so they can comfortably engage with the rest of it. This is neither how stories work or how real-life people that have Hananoi's flaws behave. Especially if we consider the fact that Hananoi is a 15 to 16-year-old kid who has familial dependency issues. His growth is slow. It culminates throughout the entire story as he meets new people, learns lessons from his mistakes, communicates his feelings, and learns new sides of himself. The Hananoi we meet in chapter 1 is already a very different person from the one that we see in volume 5. He's already begun to rely on other people and allows himself to interact with others outside of Hotaru. Even if he says this bothers him, he clearly doesn't hate it either. He is both deconstructing his former way of thinking while constructing this new identity that so many teenagers and young adults even into their 20s do. The internal conflict of changing your own beliefs is a complex push and pull. It's not something that changes overnight and rarely comes into itself in full until you start paying taxes. If Hananoi just realized his way of thinking was flawed and changed it, the story is over. There would hardly be anything else to show us. The manga may be just romance, but it's still predicated on the development and discoveries that these two characters share. Asking for strict moral purity in this work is asking for it not to show us anything flawed in the characters. Nothing questionable or misguided to let the characters grow from. It asks for the characters to be perfect right out of the gate, which is the complete antithesis of what the author of A Condition Called Love believes a story should even be. Love is never going to be something inherently healthy with no flaws at all. Definitely not during developmental years either, where everyone involved is confused. Showing flawed characters in fiction challenges us to empathize with people we otherwise wouldn't. It helps us find relatability in their struggles and connects us. It's exactly because of how flawed characters get us to empathize with them that makes us question our own values. If you're able to put yourself into the shoes of someone who is deplorable, then what does that make you? Hananoi as a character is this exact challenge for some. He is the pinnacle of someone struggling with insecurity that is misguided in their pursuit of love. He's not perfect, and he never will be. No one can be. He is the mirror that reflects our own flaws when it comes to love or romance, as well as the path for change. In not critically analyzing these aspects of Hananoi, in turn, we remove the agency from Hotaru as the protagonist to keep her moral purity, as it were. She's deemed too clueless, weak, or easily manipulated by Hananoi's actions, thus completely putting aside that Hananoi was going to give up on her, and Hotaru stepped in of her own volition. She is given constant and continual outs from the relationship through their initial first reactions, the trial dating, and even before she confesses. Even knowing his way of thinking is flawed at times, Hotaru still makes the conscious decision to stay with him because she sees past his words and looks at his actions. She only ever acts carefully after considering her own feelings and autonomy. She's not some hopeless damsel in distress who never speaks up. Hananoi is even the one who helps her become more outspoken about what she wants. Even if they don't see eye to eye on what love is at all times, she still stays with him because she trusts what they built. Describing Hotaru as a victim puts her at arm's length of the relationship that she also decided she wanted to start. It's like the audience has deemed that if she is not acting upon her own agency, then she is still able to remain pure. Taking the character's agency away also removes the author's own story in favor for the audience's own desires and moral alignment, inserting themselves into the character of Hotaru when she is in fact a character herself, not just Hananoi. What it really comes down to is allowing ourselves to possibly be uncomfortable with the media that we're consuming. Being uncomfortable is good for us every now and then. The taboo nature of certain topics shouldn't be entirely removed just on the basis that they're not morally correct. Otherwise, we get censorship. But when we critically analyze themes or actions that make us squirm, it can help us form strong foundations of our own moral compass. There is a twofold privilege in this discussion around media literacy. The first is the privilege to not critically analyze a story and not engage what it is you don't like about it. Writing something off as romanticization or red flags without digging deeper never lets you challenge yourself. It's the privilege to remain the same, never having to expand your outlook on how others might be living their lives.
But it's still something that I can engage critically with and understand that perspective and tone and the way the film or the book or whatever media engages with the themes matters, you know? And so I think it's one thing to say, this triggered me, I can't engage with it, versus this is inherently gross and problematic.
In the same vein, though, there is also a privilege in being able to engage with works that may trigger or upset other people. The fact of the matter is that all people have different life experiences. Crazy, I know. While one person may be able to cope with their traumas through a complex piece of media, someone else may just be looking for an escape. We do need to have empathy in this regard as well. A series like Ceres may be upsetting for someone who has experienced exactly what Aya has. Their dislike for the manga wouldn't then come from a lack of media literacy, but a genuine inability to engage with it. The same goes with A Condition Called Love, for that matter. While I love this series to bits, I don't think everyone who dislikes it has an inability to read between the lines. Maybe the series just didn't work for them as well as it did for me. There's privilege at play on my end, for that matter. We take accountability here, guys. What it comes down to in the end is that it is important now more than ever to be thinking critically about the media that we read or watch. In the current age of armchair criticism and bite-sized analysis, we need to stop and think about the content that we engage in and why we're enjoying it. Acknowledge its flaws or praise its ability to move us. It's when we give in to moral purity that the voices of the marginalized, the silenced voices, are the first to be shuttered. So we, in turn, must allow ourselves to engage in hard topics that we may dislike. It's not about forcing someone else to have the same opinion as you. No one has to like what you like, but you should still critically analyze why you do dislike something. Being media literate means to come to your own conclusion as to whether a piece of media accomplished what it was trying to say successfully or not. This can only be done after carefully thinking it over, letting yourself peel back the layers between the words to decipher what a piece of media means to you. Interacting with media in a way that can make us uncomfortable is a large challenge, but challenges are always good.